happen because the boss says, we're going to give it. I was with a woman today who came up to me who's a mid-level manager at Comcast, and she says, it's so important for me to get some entrepreneurial energy and innovation in Comcast, and this is so interesting. And how should I do it? You know, it's Comcast, and she went on to, make a disclaimer about how Comcast is an organization behaves. And, it's sort of tongue-in-cheek. And I said to her, she basically asked the question, how do I get senior management, 3 or 4 levels above me, to do something about this? I said, you don't. They're not going to do anything about it. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to figure out how to attach yourself to the startup community. Figure out how to bring into your team, bottom up, some entrepreneurial activity. Figure out how to take some risks in the context of the work you're doing to bring that into your organization. And let it spread out. And she told me right? And as we're talking, she says, I get it. It definitely was risky to me in the context of my work, but I'm totally game to take that risk because the worst thing that can happen is I get fired. And that would be so bad relative to not being happy about being stuck in this place in Ireland. So it's individuals in the organization, bottom up, that are taking action, that are leading, that are creating that new energy. Now, this doesn't mean that top-down doesn't work either. It certainly helps top-down. But one in the absence of the other doesn't get you that much. So over time, you need both happening. But they're not going to happen because there's this big organized plan. It's going to happen because of this messy, chaotic thing. And it doesn't matter whether you're a 50-person organization or a 50,000-person organization. The network is becoming more important than the hierarchy. And so your ability to converse and network to other people who are like-minded within the organization and to attach to people outside your organization but who your organization works with. Right? Condit's a good example, right? I know some of you here are partners of Condit, right? You don't exist in a vacuum. You exist because you have partnerships with other organizations who you work on projects with together, you have linkages between those people. There's a lot of power around that. The second is you have to have a long-term view. This woman said to me, I heard the thing about a long-term view. What do you think a long-term is in the context of company like Comcast? So what's Comcast planning cycle? Well, we have an annual planning cycle, an annual review. I said, if you took risks, when are they going to call you out on your risks? Like, how long is it going to take before somebody says, we don't want you doing that anymore? And she said, well, at least a year. And I said, oh, God, at least a year then, to go do some stuff. But if you're successful at that, and you figure out how to communicate that success, after a year, you're not going to have brought a new transformed Comcast with a new innovation culture. That might take 20 years or 30 years or 50 years, right? Certainly out of view. And the idea of participating with a long-term view becomes what's key. Same with any project anyone's on. How many people here have been working on something professionally or personally that you would consider a passion project where, it's a decade now, and the amount of experience and skills that you built by working on it for a decade, and the expertise and mastery you have are so significant. Musical instrument, art, sport, right? It takes a long time. And so use that time as a positive versus a negative. People are impatient, making progress. Don't be slow, but be realistic about the third is being inclusive. Same idea. Being inclusive in one way around the organization is very interesting. I think this building is fascinating, right? It's a really creative space that allows people to engage with each other in lots of different ways in lots of different places. If you think about so many offices that we're in these days, think about the transition from the madman offices of the 1950s to the cube farms of the 1960s and 70s and 80s, and the cube farms in the suburbs, right? How many people wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait to go to my cube in the middle of a soul-crushing office park where there's some trees, and the trees are kind of dying because there's really nothing else but the trees that are dying near them. Right? We all dream of it, right? Like, isn't that exciting? That's where you want to go to work. You don't want to go to work in the middle of, downtown Denver, or in, a fascinating, interesting place like this, sort of on the edge of downtown Denver, or in something in downtown Boulder. I mean, you've had this re-urbanization of business and of innovation where people have wanted to move back to the city and have this energy around the city. One of the things that comes out of that is this notion of density. Right? Having people near each other that are working on similar things creates real innovation and real activity around it. You still need private space, because to think, to concentrate, to be able to make progress, a lot of times you need private space. A lot of tech companies solve private space by giving everybody a pair of these headphones. And that's how you create your private space. But a lot of offices are very thoughtful and creative about that. If you think of a city like Boulder, for those of you that know Boulder, almost all of the entrepreneurial activity in Boulder, let's say, on a company, index company basis, not number of employees, but number of companies, more than 50% of it is within a five block area of downtown Boulder, maybe 5 by 10 blocks. Just incredible density of people working in different companies, but all working to create new things that are then all part of this intense community. But that's the physical connect and the physical inclusiveness. The virtual connect and the virtual inclusiveness is just as important. We have investments all around the U.S. We have video conferencing infrastructure everywhere. It's pretty simple today. Even low video conferencing using Google Hangouts is straightforward. This notion of changing your work behavior so that you have much more of an interactive experience versus yet another 19-person conference call, where as everybody's getting on a conference call, it's 1:04 p.m., and then things still going beep, and somebody says, "Who joined?" And somebody else, before they answer, it says beep, and then somebody says, "Who joined?" on top of the person saying their name. And you spend the first 10 minutes of the conference call just getting everybody in the conference call. And then the person who's the most important person in the conference call is still not on the conference call because they're running late, so you get 19 people. That's stupid, right? That's not the dynamic of how real innovative work happens. So using the virtual to help extend the space out of the physical is very powerful. It's a very powerful way to continue being inclusive. And then that last principle, activities and events, the phrase I like to use, it came up last year that I started with, is a doerocracy. We're all familiar with the notion of meritocracy, right? Our business is a meritocracy. If you work hard, you do well, you're going to get ahead. And I think when most people hear that today, they think that's bullshit, right? That was HR from the 1980s, and it's not. And sometimes it's true. I mean, it's not always true. But most of the time, it's just sort of a surface layer. It's not really the essence of what matters. The startup community is not a meritocracy. The startup community is a doerocracy. People who do stuff make progress. People who do stuff get power. People who do stuff get recognition. So the idea is you want to get people doing stuff. That's the currency that matters. And that's the currency that matters around innovation. Doing stuff doesn't mean doing it right necessarily, because a big part of innovation and a big part of entrepreneurship is having lots of things not work. In fact, almost every company I've ever been in that was successful, that involved successful, has had at least one near-death experience. Not like the flu, but like, their arm just got chopped off, and they're going to bleed out and they'll figure out what's going on with it. The other dynamic around that is that most successful companies are a long connection over time of successes and failures, where you learn from the failures and then amplify the next successes. Think about your projects. Everybody knows who does anything that's project related. There are always flaws, right? They work, you lay it out, here's the schedule, here's the timeline, here's exactly what's going to happen, and it's going to be flaws. Microphone batteries, they're totally fine, it's not our time of problem. Right? 100% of the time, if you're really trying to do something new and innovative, you're going to have things that don't quite work. And that's okay. That's part of the essence of it. The notion is you figure it out and you keep moving forward and you learn on the next dynamic. And so that linkage is so powerful across startup communities, but across innovation. The last slide I'll leave you with, we'll do some Q&A if you have any questions about it. The entrepreneurship, the innovation could be what you can do, what I use, it doesn't matter. I don't know the answer to that question. The interesting dynamic today in our society, certainly in the US, I think in many parts of the world, not everywhere, but in many parts of the world, is that we're changing from this world where you have to ask for permission. You have to get approval. You have to work your way up to get to a position where you can try to do something risky. To a situation where that's actually kind of an accepted norm. It's a desirable trait. Now, there's lots of organizations that don't know how to express that as a desirable trait. So it's not universal, it's not the default. But it's also not something to be avoided. And I think generationally, especially when you think about people who today are in their 20s and are entering the workforce and are starting to do their first things in the world, there's very little patience for that dynamic. And if you think about kids who are 5 today, they will have never known a day on this planet without being able to access with people from wherever they are. They'll never know a day when they can't communicate electronically, immediately, over any geography without any cost or any perceived cost. There's so many things that are changing in terms of how we interact with each other as human beings. And I would encourage everybody to play into that and to recognize that it's not only the shift to some virtual reality that we can create science fiction movies about, but that the physical spaces we create, the environments we create for ourselves, for our families, for our kids, for people that we work with, for our cities, and how they're configured, matter even more than ever. Because we want to create environments that are incredibly stimulating, but still allow this network phenomenon, still allow this creativity, still allow this free flow of people and information across them. And I think that's a big challenge for a lot of cities and for a lot of companies over the next 10 or 20 years. But you see it happening and being reinvented in some incredible places. Anybody in this room from Detroit? Anybody in this room been in Detroit in the last year? Pretty crazy, isn't it? You have a city, I ran in Detroit Marathon in 2012 in the fall. You have a city that was built for 2.5 million people that, I don't know what today, but 2012 had less than 700,000 people. Okay? It's crazy. However, if Google Maps says to get from point A to point B, you go from here to here, that's not what a cab driver took you. Cab driver took you to the highway, way over here, and back here. Because going from here to here, you could get killed. It was dangerous. And there's no cost to using that infrastructure because there's so much of it. Now you have a city that's reinventing itself. And the way they're reinventing itself is not by taking all those roads out and resizing the city for 700,000 people, but by changing the public spaces, changing point A to point B and what's happening there. Putting Andy Gilbert, who owns Quicken Loans, is one of the leaders of the city, took this entire company from the suburbs and moved it into a building high-rise in downtown Detroit. What happened when he did that? All of a sudden, all around the high-rise, restaurants, coffee shops, dry cleaners, I just revitalized the 3x3 blocks part of the city, hotel, just by changing the focus. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in lots of other places, because this notion of the hierarchy being the thing that we operate under and the way that things are controlled, again, still there, still important, but less important. So, hope that was interesting. Any questions people want to talk about or press on or go over?
First of all, very interesting.
I know it's